Okay, so this is my application here. It's a simple calculator app I built on top of the week 3 assignment, which was calculating miles to kilometers. And it's effectively an app for calculating the alcohol percentage in fermenting Kilju, which is essentially a sugar wash seltzer. Okay, so there's two modes. I'm going to do the simple mode first. So this is where you input the amount of liters you're using. So say we're using 5 liters of water, say 1500 grams of sugar, 20 degrees Celsius over time over 5 days. We can choose which type of yeast we're using. So if we choose Pica Hiva, like turbo yeast first, it will give us this percentage. And then say I do 10 days, I might ferment a bit more. It's 10 days the maximum. Oh, maybe 15 days will be, yeah, 15 days is the maximum it seems. You can also change the different types of yeast. They'll give you a warning that, once the yeast reaches its tolerance, it won't ferment anymore. The sugar will remain unfermented. And also, if you know a bit more what you're doing here, you can use I suppose, the microbiology mode, but you'd have to calculate your max alcohol percentage yourself, which is typically on yeast packets if it's for brewing. You'll have to know your grow rate, which is calculated with base grow rate, which you'd probably have to study yourself, and temperature, and then the lag phase, which is essentially the time it takes for the yeast to wake up and start fermenting the sugar. I also have the Google Gemini API down here, which returns the approximate cost per liter of how much it would take to ferment Kilju in your area. I previously tried Oulu, but let's try somewhere else. I don't know. Let's try Zurich in Switzerland. It might take a second to return. Yeah, it's a bit more expensive there compared to Oulu. Okay, so now let's get into the actual code itself. I'll start with the calculations and how they're handled. Oh yeah. Okay, so in this module here, this Kotlin file, I'm managing the functions. I mean, not the functions. I suppose they are mathematical functions that are being returned to the main activity. So the first one is just the formula to return, um, alcohol percentage, which is calculated by 17 grams of sugar, giving 1% of alcohol. The second one is adjusting the growth rate based on temperature, which is just this formula here, which is the base grow rate, depending on the type of yeast you're using, and modified by the temperature. And then finally, this is the overall alcohol fermentation function, which is basically yeast producing alcohol over time. I'm not going to go into all the variables. They're available on the info activity here, actually, if you're interested. So this is just another page with some of the info about the app, which is one of the requirements. I just included what the formulas, like what the variables in the formulas actually mean. This is typically for all of them. This one is mainly for if you're using the more advanced microbiology mode. Okay, and let's just look at the yeast profiles first, which is just a class, um, which is defining, how the different values that are stored by the yeast, basically. So we have the base grow rate for Bikahiva, like turbo yeast, that's zero point 0.7. For bread yeast, it's 0.3 because it's not made for fermenting, and wine yeast is 0.4 because it ferments slower, it creates a richer taste. And T0 here, we have the lag phase, how long it's going to take the lag. Picahila doesn't really have a lag phase. It basically starts fermenting right away. It takes maybe like an hour or two, if even. Then we have bread yeast, which takes half a day to wake up and start eating the sugar, and then wine yeast is a bit slower, it takes a whole day. Okay, now let's get into the main activity itself. So I just set the base tolerance to 20, which is the same as Picahila. Okay, just declaring the UI here. This is for the icon, making it 1%, not sorry, 10% of the total screen size up here. I didn't want to be too big, but I didn't want to be too small either, so it's just based on the size of the screen. And it links to this image here. Dun. Okay, so this is where like the text for the result is, like what alcohol percentage it's going to be. And then over here, I have the logic for turning it orange for if the alcohol limit is reached, and just gives a little warning message that the rest of the sugar won't be fermented. It's already available here. These are just the containers for storing the for where the user inputs their values. Just these things here. Same thing except for the advanced mode here. Or already had the advanced mode. Yeah. Okay, and these are just some default values for the volume, the sugar, the temperature, all the various variables. Just have a default setting. Okay, and here is where we're getting, volume, sugar, and time. And then they're being input over here into the various formulas which are found in fermentation calculator file. Okay. And then yeast profile. These are the buttons here for the yeast profile. Here. Oh no, sorry, this is the base one, I think. And then, yeah, here's the buttons for the yeast profile. And then this is just the button which toggles the variables. So if you go here, it changes from volume, grams, and temperature to potential percentage growth rate and the lag phase, which you'd have to know yourself if you're using this one. Okay, and this is just everything to do with the Google Gemini API, which is a very simple API. You just have to first create, the label of the button, and then of course this is the title and your location. This is where you're declaring which model of the actual LLM you're using. I'm using 2.5's Flash, which is outdated, but it uses less credits, which, I mean, you have like 300 euros free credits. I'm just using the free credits. I don't want them to all be used up, so I'm just using this one here. And then we're getting the API key from .env, which I haven't pushed, so you'd have to declare your own .env file and put in your own Gemini API key if you wish to use this part of the program. Okay, then once the actual button is clicked, it displays the calculating, so the user knows that it's actually calculating, because as you saw earlier, it can take some time. And then this is just a prompt, right? So you're just giving a prompt that the LLM is going to take in, and then it's going to process the user's input based on this prompt. And just basically says that if the user doesn't enter a location, say location not found, please try again. And if the user does enter the location, find like how much it would cost to make Kilju per liter in that area. And then just an error message here is an exception for if there's like some sort of 404 or 403. I had a 403 earlier where I accidentally pushed the API key, and the API key was disabled because it was detected as leaked. And then here we're just declaring the actual layout of the app itself. So yeah, that's everything.